First, some of the ants turn themselves into living safety pins, pulling the leaves together and holding them there. That's one team. Next come the weavers. They pick up larvae, their yet unformed little sisters, take them to the seams and use them like living shuttles, tiny glue guns. They stimulate them to secrete threads of sticky web-like silk that holds the leaves together. Without any apparent supervision, the ants know exactly where to clamp the leaves and where to apply the silk. There are 500,000 ants in the colony, but they behave as though they were all part of a single mind, each one doing what's needed in the right way to build a complex of chambers and corridors out of living leaves. What kind of animals are these? What kind of intelligence? What is an ant? It's an insect, a social insect in the same group as the bees and wasps. A human weighs about 10 million times more than an individual ant. But since ants far outnumber people, all the ants in the world weigh about as much as all the people. But while there's only one species of human, there are thousands of different species of ant. Each one is a finely tuned specialist, exquisitely adapted to its own particular environmental niche. But all species of ant have the same basic body design. It's the best one for their miniature world, but it's a design that has kept them small. As insects, they have 6 legs and 3 body segments: head, thorax, and abdomen. And like all insects, ants wear their skeletons on the outside. This exoskeleton is a hard, waterproof armor that supports and protects. Ants breathe through their sides, through valves called spiracles. When they open, air rushes in, circulates through a network of tubes, and then rushes out again. Every cell gets its oxygen delivered direct. That's the internal air conditioning system. Ants also have a disinfecting system, a pair of metapleural glands that ooze antibiotic and keep both ant and colony free of germs. Only ants have this. Ants, in fact, are little chemical factories. A whole battery of glands produce chemical signals or pheromones that are the commands in ant communication. Ants send messages by laying a trail of these chemicals. And other ants pick them up with their antennae, which are covered in tiny sensory organs capable of reading the complex chemical messages. Then there are the eyes. They are made up of hundreds of small lenses that produce a mosaic image of the world. An ant's jaws or mandibles are its main tools. Molded from the hard exoskeleton, they come in every shape imaginable. Their size and design can tell us a lot about an ant's lifestyle. Mandibles are as important to an ant as our hands are to us. Depending on the species, they can serve as anything from scissors to forklifts to pliers. Really appreciating the variety among ants means looking at them close up. Professor Edward Wilson of Harvard University has been looking at ants for most of his life.
It's easy to think that all ants look alike. I mean, after all, we're looking at them from way up here, way down there, you know, like Godzilla looking at the inhabitants of New York City. But in fact, these little creatures are strikingly different from one another, one species to the next. One ant is typically as different from another kind of ant as a wolf is from a tiger or even a rhinoceros.
About 10,000 species of ants are known to science, and there are probably 10,000 more waiting to be discovered. The largest and most abundant group is the Pheidole ants. For the past 10 years, Professor Wilson has been studying, drawing, and describing the 625 species that make up this group. Over half are new species, and he is the first person to really see them in detail. Among them, he has discovered ants with weird and wonderful adaptations.
Let me give you an example. Two of the species that I'm describing right now have anatomical features which are just amazing. This is a species which has five, count them, five horns on the front of the head. It uses, I guess, as a battering device. It has two horns sticking out here, two horns sticking out there, and then a horn sticking like a nose out the middle. This was so unusual that I named it Pheidole mirabilis, the miracle Pheidole. Maybe I got carried away a bit with that, but I thought it was truly a wonderful one. Here's another one. This species has a plate-shaped head. I mean, just totally different from this other one. It has big bristles all around the head, but also conspicuously sticking out from around the mouth like a mustache. This one I decided to name Pheidole mistax. Mistax means mustache, a mustache Pheidole.
Get close enough to ants and they might almost be from another planet. They have evolved shapes and structures beyond human imagining. The one thing all ants have in common is society. These are wood ants. They're foragers, predators that go out, find food, and bring it back to the nest. Even though each ant is strong, capable of carrying twice her own body weight, a lot of the prey is just too big for one ant. In which case there's teamwork. It's not size, it's not speed, it's not even strength that makes ants what they are. It's this, the teamwork. Hundreds of thousands of cooperating insects spreading through the woodland like a huge digestive tract, pulling anything edible towards the gut of their nest. The nurse workers inside the nest don't go out to hunt for food. They stay in the darkness underground. Ants cannot eat solids. These foragers feed on the body fluids of their prey. Each takes what food it needs for itself. The rest is stored in a part of its gut called the social stomach. This food is for sharing. It is fed to the nurse workers, and it's done with a sort of a kiss. The ants lock jaws, and liquid is passed drop by drop from the feeder ant into the mouth of her hungry sister. One of the strengths of an ant colony is the individual ant's dispensability. Killing a colony by killing the workers is all but impossible. But one ant in the colony is absolutely vital, the queen. By using the sperm she stored when she mated, she's the mother of everyone, and everyone's future. An ant manufacturing machine at the head of a conveyor belt of eggs. Eggs are cared for by the nurse workers. These wood ant eggs stick together so that they can be carried easily as a bundle. The creature that emerges from an ant's egg looks nothing like an ant. What hatches out is the ant's larval form, the baby stage, an eating machine designed solely for growing. And as it grows, it sheds its skin to reveal a new skin underneath. 3 or 4 times this happens, until finally the eating stops and the larva prepares for the next stage of its life. This is the pupa, and developing inside the protective silk sleeping bag is a recognizable ant. All through this process, the nurse ants take care of their younger sisters, producing a steady stream of fresh, female, but sterile workers. But once a year, every year, they produce another kind of ant, ants with wings. Ants capable of sex. They're the males and fertile females that will spread the colony's inheritance far beyond this nest. They're what make the ants invincible. One day in July in northern Arizona, one colony of harvester ants is doing what all the harvester ant colonies in northern Arizona are doing today: launching. The once-a-year royal brood come above ground and begin to fly, and to find individuals from other colonies, and to mate. It's a scramble as the males battle to fertilize the young potential queens. And then, having done the only thing in life they were ever meant to do, the males die. All of them. Young queens die too, in great numbers. But some find just the right kind of fresh ground, dig in, and start laying the eggs that will give rise to new colonies. How did a system like this come to be? Once in the early days of the Earth, insects were the only land animals. They were also the only animals in the air. At least 100 million years before birds and bats appeared on the evolutionary scene, insects had wings. And one of those was a wasp, a solitary wasp living like many wasps that still exist today, stinging and leaving prey paralyzed for its offspring to eat. In time, some of these wasps started building their nests in clusters, probably to help deter predators. They were still essentially solitary, though, and their offspring left the nest as soon as they could fly. Then, millions of years later, appeared wasps whose offspring, daughters, didn't fly the nest. They grew up there and helped their mother raise more daughters. They became purely their mother's helpers, and didn't themselves reproduce. Over time, these wasps began to look more like ants. They lost their wings and evolved the disinfecting glands so that cramped underground living wasn't an invitation to disease. They hung on to their powerful wasp jaws and stings, though, and were among the fiercest predators around by the time the dinosaurs appeared. Ants not only saw a lot of individual dinosaurs come and go, they saw the end of the whole dinosaur dynasty. And ants have been ruling the world ever since. If the ability to communicate has made human society what it is, it's done the same for ant society. Professor Edward Wilson.
I'm often asked, do ants really communicate with one another? And the answer is, of course they do. Tiny animals that live in the ground almost have to communicate with chemicals. When you're that small, you're in the dark, a lot of the time in closed spaces, it's very difficult, obviously, to communicate by sight. It's difficult to evolve systems to allow you to communicate by sound. The ants have elaborated a chemical communication system, probably the most complex in the animal kingdom, and as close to what might be the kind of communication system we would find on another planet. In one of the early experiments, I succeeded in locating the gland at the end of the body, the abdomen, of the fire ant, a colony of which I have here, and extracting the material the ants use to lay odor trails that they follow.
When this substance is laid as an artificial trail, it speaks volumes to the ants. Although ants communicate using vision, vibration, and touch, at least 90% is chemical. 1 milligram of this chemical could lead a column of ants 3 times around the world. It is a sophisticated language of smell, an entire vocabulary of chemical signals and messages.
Ants detect smell in a way that is obvious when you think about it. And they do it with their feelers, the antennae, these appendages on the head that are constantly in motion, sweeping back and forth and up and down. Bristling, these are bristling with organs of smell that are very sophisticated in detecting wide ranges of minute traces of chemicals. They can sweep the antennae in and out of odor fields and know where to go according to where the smell is coming from. And they're very sophisticated in distinguishing large numbers of chemicals that way.
One use for the exquisite sense of smell is to tell insider from outsider. All the members of this weaver ant colony smell the same. Weaver ants from other colonies, even though they're the same species and look exactly the same, smell subtly different. What happens to an ant with that difference is not subtle. It doesn't matter what you look like, as long as you've got that membership smell. A fact a jumping spider dines out on. It has evolved the ability to mimic the smell of the weaver ant colony it lives with. Then it can roam freely among the ants, picking and choosing juicy meals. The soft, fat larvae are best. A weaver ant confronts what, as far as she's concerned, is one of her sisters. The ant's just doing her job, carrying a larva from one place to another. And here's a sister ant that's bigger and stronger than it ought to be, and doing something it really ought not to be doing. But the smell is kosher. And while there's cause for confusion, there's none for alarm. Despite the occasional counterfeiter, though, smell is overwhelmingly useful to an ant. Except here. It's no use at all in the eastern Sahara, where delicate odors are instantly burnt up by the sun. But that doesn't stop these ants, called cataglyphus, from foraging. Nothing stops them. Not temperatures of 130 degrees, and not burning sand. The ants scavenge for creatures that have succumbed to heat exhaustion. When food is found, the ant must return home as quickly as possible to avoid a similar death. Getting lost could be lethal. But how do they find their way around? That's what this team of Zurich University students, working under Professor Rüdiger Wehner, is trying to find out. It may look as if they're getting ready for a game of giant chess. But it's really like giant graph paper.